The familiar lullaby of the porch swing, a rhythm etched into its sun-bleached wood, cradled Lily as she swayed. Countless afternoons had dissolved here, her bare feet idly swirling dust motes that danced in golden light shafts, piercing the honeysuckle's embrace. Today, however, the neighborhood's gentle hum yielded to a different melody, a deep, chest-vibrating thrum, rising from the soles of her feet. This was the rumble, the harbinger of a ritual, as ingrained as the turning seasons in their forgotten corner of the world. Across the street, a slow, deliberate congregation commenced. Motorcycles materialized, singly then in pairs and trios. Not the postal truck's polite purr, but a growl hinting at barely leashed power. The Hells Angels. For as long as Lily remembered, they'd been a fixture, not a source of fear, but a vibrant spectacle, a riot of color and noise in her otherwise muted existence. She watched with furrowed brow, a quiet intensity, as if imprinting every detail of their impending journey onto her memory. The lead bike, a sleek black machine, its chrome winking like a predator's eye, glided to a stop. Its rider, whose beard seemed to consume his face, dismounted with an efficient grace born of years. The engine died, plunging the street into a profound hush, a collective breath before the crescendo. Then, a cherry-red beast roared beside it, its thunder briefly eclipsing the distant cicadas. Soon the streets swelled with Harleys, a formidable array of steel and leather, their engines occasionally sputtering as riders nudged them into formation. Lily leaned forward, chin propped in her hands. She recognized many faces, if not names. Big John, whose laughter could strip leaves from trees, and Whisper, a man of quietude, who nonetheless commanded profound respect. Today, their expressions were resolute, a shared focus hinting at a long road ahead. The air thickened, not yet with exhaust, but with anticipation. Oil and gasoline, mingling with the honeysuckle's faint sweetness, composed a unique perfume, Lily's very scent of adventure. Their jackets, emblazoned with the iconic winged skull, clung like a second skin. Each patch, every faded denim vest, whispered stories she could only imagine. These were men forged by the road, their faces etched by sun and wind, their eyes holding an untamed glint. Their wildness had always captivated Lily, a stark contrast to the gentle, almost fragile world inside her house. More bikes arrived, their engines adding to the growing hum. A faint tremor began beneath the porch swing, a tickle in her toes that ascended, a low, resonant frequency settling deep in her chest. Power was gathering, a force patiently poised for release. She watched a stocky rider with a neatly trimmed mustache meticulously polishing his chrome headlight, each movement a deliberate part of the preparation. A signal, a raised hand, an exchanged nod. A ripple went through the group. Engines ignited, not in unison, but a staggered chorus, each ignition layering another sound onto the evolving soundscape. First a tentative cough, then a steady thrum, then a full-throated roar. The rumble, initially a ground vibration, now ascended into a physical presence, a wave of sound inundating the street, the houses, Lily herself. The porch swing now shook earnestly, a rhythmic shudder mirroring the street's throbbing. Honeysuckle leaves trembled. A loose shingle above rattled a frantic percussion. The air filled with the rich, pungent scent of burning gasoline and hot metal, a smell that always sparked a flip-flop in Lily's stomach. A mix of excitement and a strange, almost wistful longing. The roar intensified, a symphony of internal combustion, each engine adding its unique voice to the collective chorus. To Lily it wasn't aggressive, but powerful, almost majestic. It was the sound of freedom, of untamed spirit, of a journey about to unfold. She felt it in her bones, a deep-seated vibration resonating with something primal within her. A sound that always made her want to run, to follow, to be part of whatever grand adventure lay beyond the horizon. Now, all mounted, the riders revved their engines in unison, a final thunderous salute before departure. The ground bucked beneath her. The house's very foundations seemed to shift with the sheer force of the sound. It was magnificent, overwhelming, utterly captivating. Dust motes, once lazily dancing, now swirled in miniature cyclones around the roaring machines. Sunlight itself seemed to shimmer and bend in the vibrations. Lily's wide, luminous eyes tracked their every move. The leading bike, an elder statesman of the club, eased forward, its front wheel turning, a silent command for the others. The rumble morphed into a steady, forward-moving roar as the column of motorcycles began to roll. They moved with synchronized grace, a powerful, unstoppable serpent of steel and leather. The street, usually so quiet, pulsed with their energy, their noise, their undeniable presence. As the first few bikes passed her house, a gust of wind, laden with fuel and exhaust, ruffled her hair. She watched them recede down the street, their figures shrinking, the roar gradually fading into a distant drone. Her heart, usually so steady, pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. A familiar magnetic pull tugged at her, an urge to chase after the disappearing spectacle. It was a longing that always accompanied their departure, a quiet ache for the adventure she couldn't join. The street, now mostly empty, still held the ghosts of their sound, a lingering vibration in the air. The silence that followed wasn't truly silent, but a soft, humming echo of the power that had just passed. A whiff of danger. The rumble of the departing motorcycles faded, leaving a strange quiet in its wake, an emptiness that pressed in on Lily. She watched until the last glint of chrome vanished around the bend, a wistful sigh escaping her lips. The air still hummed with the phantom vibrations of engines, a wild echo in her ears. It was then, as the last remnants of the Hells Angels' grand spectacle dissipated, that a different scent pricked at her nostrils. Not the metallic tang of exhaust or the rich, earthy smell of the road, but something acrid and sharp. She wrinkled her nose, trying to identify it. It was faint at first, like a distant bonfire. Then it grew stronger, carrying a distinct note of something burning that shouldn't be. Her gaze drifted lazily toward her house, a comforting landmark nestled among the willows. That's when she saw it. A wisp of smoke, barely perceptible, curling from the kitchen window. Lily frowned, a tiny knot of unease tightening in her stomach. Mama must have left something on the stove, she thought, a fleeting annoyance at her mother's occasional forgetfulness. But then, as she watched, the wisp thickened, blooming into a gray cloud that billowed outward, sluggish and menacing. It wasn't just a burnt pot. This was something more. Her breath hitched. A cold dread snaked its way up her spine, chilling her to the bone. Mama. The realization hit her. With the force of a physical blow, Mama was taking her afternoon nap. She always did, especially on warm days when the sun beat down on their little house. Lily's mind reeled, a frantic jumble of images and sounds. The soft creak of the porch swing, the roar of the bikes, the scent of adventure. All of it dissolved into a single terrifying thought. Mama was inside. Her heart, which moments ago had thrummed with the distant excitement of the bikers, now pounded a frantic, irregular rhythm against her ribs. Each beat was a desperate drum, echoing the growing panic within her. The small spark of fear in Lily's chest, initially a mere flicker, quickly ignited, blossoming into a roaring wildfire that consumed her entire being. Mama! The word tore from her throat, a raw, strangled sound. She launched herself off the porch swing, her feet barely touching the ground as she sprinted toward the house. The gray smoke was no longer a wisp, but a thick, swirling curtain, obscuring the kitchen window entirely. A faint crackling sound, like dry leaves underfoot, reached her ears, magnified by her terror. Mama, wake up! Lily screamed again, her voice hoarse, tears blurring her vision. She reached the porch steps, her hands fumbling for the doorknob, which felt strangely hot beneath her touch. A wave of heat washed over her face, forcing her to recoil. The smoke, now dense and choking, streamed from under the doorframe, a black tendril twisting into the sunlit air. No, this wasn't happening. Not Mama. Lily stumbled back, her mind racing, searching for a solution. The front door was impassable. The window... They were old, stiff, probably painted shut. Desperation clawed at her throat. She could hear the faint muffled sound of a smoke detector, a distant wail that only added to the nightmare. Mama was a heavy sleeper, especially when she was tired. The thought sent a fresh jolt of terror through Lily. She glanced back at the empty road, a wild, impossible hope flickering within her. The bikers. They couldn't be that far. They had just left. If only they hadn't gone. If only she had called out to them then, when the first wisp of smoke appeared. A wave of bitter regret washed over her, threatening to drown her in despair. But there was no time for that. Mama! Her gaze darted around, searching for anything, any small advantage. The garden hose? Too slow. A bucket of water? Useless against this. The fire was growing, a hungry beast devouring her home, threatening to consume the most precious person in her life. Lily took a shaky breath, forcing herself to think. The back door. Maybe the fire hadn't reached the back yet. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble. But she had to try. She had to. Mama was in there. And Lily, despite her small stature and trembling limbs, would move mountains if it meant saving her. Without another thought, she turned and bolted around the side of the house, her bare feet pounding against the dry earth, fueled by a love fiercer than any flame. A tiny sparrow's cry. The last chrome-plated machine rumbled to life, a deep, guttural growl that vibrated through the ground beneath Lily's worn sneakers. Her breath hitched. No, this couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when the acrid scent of smoke was thickening, clawing its way into her throat, hot and metallic. Her heart hammered against her ribs. A frantic sparrow trapped in a cage. The line of motorcycles, a metallic serpent of power and noise, was already a blur of movement. Tail lights, like angry red eyes, receded down the dusty lane. Her mother. Inside, sleeping. The thought was a cold, sharp blade twisting in her gut. Annoyance, the fleeting irritation at her mother's predictable nap, vanished, replaced by a tidal wave of sheer, unadulterated terror. Don't leave yet! Please! The words tore from her throat, a raw, desperate shriek that felt impossibly small against the thunderous symphony of 40 roaring engines. Her voice, usually soft and a little shy, was a thin thread of sound, almost swallowed whole by the mechanical maelstrom. She watched, a silent scream building behind her eyes as the final biker, a giant figure in black leather, kicked his machine into gear. He glanced over his shoulder, a fleeting, almost dismissive look, before accelerating to catch up with the others. No, she wouldn't let them leave. She couldn't. Her mother's face, serene in sleep, flashed before her eyes. The image fueled a sudden fierce surge of adrenaline. Without another thought, Lily launched herself forward. Her small legs, usually content with a leisurely stroll, pumped furiously, a blur of motion as she sprinted after the receding line of motorcycles. Each stride was a desperate plea, a silent prayer to a sky that seemed to be darkening with more than just the setting sun. The distance between her and the last bike seemed to stretch impossibly. The wind, stirred by the departing machines, whipped her hair across her face, stinging her eyes. Dust, kicked up by the heavy tires, billowed around her, making her cough. Still she ran. Her chest burned, a fiery protest from her overworked lungs, but she ignored it. Her focus narrowed to a single, unwavering point, the diminishing silhouette of the last motorcycle. Wait! Please wait! This time, her voice was a ragged gasp, barely audible even to her own ears. Tears blurred her vision, hot trails carving paths through the grime on her cheeks. She stumbled, nearly falling, but somehow regained her footing. The memory of her mother's gentle lullabies, her warm hugs, the way she always knew how to make Lily laugh, all of it propelled her forward. She couldn't lose her. Not like this. Not to a silent, creeping fire while help roared away down the road. She saw it then, a faint flicker of uncertainty in the last biker's posture, a slight turn of his helmet. Had he heard her? Or was it just wishful thinking, a desperate hallucination born of panic? She pushed harder, her small frame propelled by a primal fear. Her legs ached, her lungs screamed, but the image of her mother, now superimposed with the flickering orange glow she'd glimpsed through the window, spurred her on. The line of bikes was a good 100 yards ahead now, a dark, menacing ribbon against the fading light. Despair, cold and sharp, threatened to overwhelm her. They were gone. They hadn't heard her. She was too small, her voice too weak. But then, an impossible sight. The last biker, the one who had glanced back, suddenly slowed. Then, with a surprisingly fluid motion, he raised his left arm. A signal. Slowly, almost impossibly, the long line of roaring machines began to break. A ripple of confusion seemed to pass through the riders, their formations breaking as they came to a staggered halt. Engines idled, their deep thrum now a more manageable roar, but still a formidable wall of sound. Lily, her breath coming in ragged gasps, watched them, a fragile hope blossoming in her chest. They had stopped. They had actually stopped. She didn't allow herself to slow down, not yet. Not until she reached them, until she could make them understand. Her small legs, burning with effort, kept pumping. The distance, though now closing rapidly, still felt like a marathon. She could feel the heat of the fire on her back, a faint, malevolent presence urging her on. Her mother. She had to save her mother. And maybe, just maybe, these formidable leather-clad strangers were the only ones who could help. The road captain's glance. The roar of 40 engines coalesced into a thunderous wave, threatening to swallow Lily whole. Black leather jackets and gleaming chrome blurred into a retreating tide, each turn of the wheels an agonizing tug away from her and her burning home. Her small legs pumped, a desperate, frantic rhythm against the gritty asphalt. The air, already thick with the acrid scent of smoke, now vibrated with the diminishing growl of the departing machines. "Please!" she shrieked, her voice a raw, thin thread stretched to breaking. "Don't leave yet! Please!" Her lungs burned, each gasp a fiery knife edge, but she pushed harder. Her mother's face, pale and still in the smoke-filled room, was a vivid, terrifying image, propelling her forward. The last few bikes, a blur of dark shapes, were picking up speed, the gaps between them widening, threatening to swallow her pleas into the vast, indifferent morning. A cold dread, sharp as an icicle, pierced through her. They hadn't heard her. They were gone. Then a flicker, a slight hesitation in the rhythmic beat of the final engine. Ahead of the pack, a figure on a massive touring bike, its chrome exhaust pipes gleaming, shifted. This was Road Captain Grizz, a man whose long, gray beard flowed over his chest like a winter waterfall. His expression, usually a mask of weathered resolve, was now etched with a faint, almost imperceptible curiosity. He'd heard something. A faint, high-pitched keening that snagged at the edges of the engine's thunder. It was a sound out of place, a dissonance in the symphony of their departure. He glanced in his mirror, a quick, habitual flick of his eyes. The road behind them was a ribbon of gray, stretching back toward the cluster of houses they'd just left. For a split second, he saw nothing but the shimmering heat haze. Then a tiny red dot, a splash of vibrant color against the muted backdrop, resolved itself into a frantic, sprinting child. Lily. Her small arms pumped, her bright red jacket a beacon of desperate urgency. Grizz's brow furrowed. He'd seen plenty of things on the road, but a child chasing a full club, screaming at the top of her lungs, was a first. There was no playful mischief in her stride, no childish pique in her frantic movements. This was pure, unadulterated terror, a desperate plea for something only they, the departing strangers, could provide. He felt a stir, a faint tremor, of something he hadn't felt in years, a tug of primal instinct, a call to respond to a vulnerability so stark, so undeniable. His hand, a gnarled mass of muscle and sinew, shot out. A sharp, decisive motion, palm flat, fingers splayed, signaling a halt. The universal sign for stop. The bikes behind him, a disciplined wave of steel and leather, began to slow, their collective roar softening to a rumbling purr. Brake lights flared, a sudden blossoming of crimson against the receding morning. Lily stumbled, her breath catching in her throat, as the last bike in the line finally braked. The sudden silence, punctuated only by the idling engines, was deafening after the thunderous chase. She gasped, doubling over, her hands on her knees, trying to draw enough air into her burning lungs. Her chest ached, a sharp, insistent pain. But the sight of the stopped bikes, their riders now turning to look at her, filled her with a fragile, exhilarating hope. The road captain, Grizz, swung his heavy leg over the seat, dismounting with a grace that belied his size. His eyes, the color of flint, fixed on her. They held no judgment, only a deep, unsettling inquiry. He took a slow, deliberate step toward her, his boots crunching on the gravel. "What's the matter, kid?" His voice, when he spoke, was a low rumble, surprisingly gentle beneath the gruff exterior. "Why the hell are you chasing us?" Lily straightened up, wiping a tear from her grimy cheek with the back of her hand. Her throat was raw, her voice still a croak, but the words tumbled out, urgent and desperate, each one a desperate plea for help. My mom, she's trapped." Breathlessly, Lily's lungs burned, each gasp a jagged tear in her throat. The distance, usually so trivial, felt like a continent as she stumbled towards the looming figures and the idling rumble of their machines. Her small legs, fueled by a terrifying cocktail of adrenaline and despair, propelled her forward. But her body was failing. Her vision blurred, not just from the tears that streaked through the grime on her cheeks, but from the sheer exhaustion that threatened to buckle her knees. The scent of smoke, acrid and metallic, clung to her red jacket, a suffocating reminder of the inferno devouring her home. She finally reached the line of stopped motorcycles, their chrome glinting menacingly even in the hazy afternoon light. The air thrummed with the low growl of engines, a sound that usually filled her with a thrilling, secret awe, but now only amplified her frantic heartbeat. Grizz, a titan of a man with eyes like polished stones, stood directly in her path, his immense shadow falling over her like a shroud. His presence, so intimidating just moments ago, was now her only anchor. In a world that had suddenly tilted off its axis. "My house!" Lily choked out, her voice a ragged whisper that tore itself from her raw throat. She pointed a trembling finger back towards the spiraling plume of black smoke, now thicker, darker, a monstrous flag unfurling against the pale sky. Her breath hitched, each inhale a painful struggle. "It's on fire! Mama's inside!" Tears, hot and fresh, mingled with the streaks of soot, carving clean paths down her cheeks. Her chest heaved, desperate for air, but the words kept tumbling out, fueled by a primal need to be understood, to be heard. The fire trucks," she gasped, her voice cracking with the effort. "They're stuck. Across town. There was a pile up. No one's coming." She looked up at Grizz, her eyes wide and pleading, reflecting the flickering orange glow of the distant blaze. The fierce urgency in her gaze cut through the lingering haze of his previous irritation, replacing it with a grim comprehension. The other bikers, a silent, unmoving phalanx, watched her with expressions ranging from grim curiosity to outright shock. The raw, unadulterated terror emanating from this small, soot-stained girl was palpable, silencing the usual banter and bravado that typically filled their ranks. "Please," Lily whimpered, her voice barely audible above the rhythmic throb of the engines. She clutched at the front of her jacket, her small hands balled into tight fists, as if holding on to the last vestiges of her courage. "Please, you have to help. She's trapped. She can't get out." The image of her mother, frail and vulnerable, caught in the inferno, flashed behind her eyes, spurring a fresh wave of panic. "She needs help. She needs you." Her gaze swept over the sea of leather and denim, each face a blur of unfamiliarity, yet each holding a sliver of potential hope. She was a tiny, desperate beacon in a vast, indifferent ocean, her small voice rising above the roar of the engines, the crackle of the distant fire, and the deafening silence of her own fear. The weight of her mother's life, of her entire world, rested on this breathless plea, on the improbable mercy of these formidable strangers. A turn of purpose. Grizz's eyes, which moments before had held a flicker of detached curiosity, sharpened, reflecting the orange glow of the distant inferno. The smoke, thick and oily, billowed against the bruised twilight sky, a stark punctuation mark on the horizon. He saw not just the smoke, but the fear etched into every line of Lily's soot-streaked face, the frantic dance in her wide, tear-filled eyes. He saw the desperation in her trembling hands, clasped together, as if in prayer, and the raw, guttural plea that still echoed in the crisp evening air. The low rumble of idling engines filled the brief silence, a mechanical counterpoint to the frantic beat of Lily's heart. 39 pairs of eyes, hidden mostly behind tinted visors and dark sunglasses, were now fixed on Grizz, awaiting his command. They had seen countless things on the open road, witnessed myriad human dramas unfold, but this was different. This wasn't a broken-down car, or a lost tourist, or even a bar brawl. This was a young girl, alone and terrified, her world quite literally collapsing in flames behind her. Grizz's gaze swept from the smoke plume back to Lily, taking in her small, shaking frame, the way her shoulders hunched with the burden of her terror. He didn't need elaborate explanations or intricate details. The core of it was painfully clear. A woman, trapped, with no help on the way. The fire department, delayed by some unforeseen accident, was out of the picture. It was a scenario that resonated with an ancient code, a primal understanding of justice and intervention that ran deeper than any club rules or societal norms. When someone was truly in peril, and all conventional avenues of aid were blocked, there was only one path. A subtle shift in his posture, a tightening of his jaw, was the only outward sign of his decision. He didn't speak. didn't issue a verbal command. He didn't need to. His crew knew him, understood the language of his silent resolve. He took a deep breath, the scent of burning wood and desperate hope mixing in the cool air. The silence stretched, taut with anticipation, as Lily watched him, her breath caught in her throat. She searched his face for any sign, any flicker of compassion, any indication that her desperate plea had pierced through the intimidating facade. Then, with a decisive twist of his wrist, Grizz's powerful black Harley-Davidson began to turn. The front wheels swung in a wide arc, the heavy machine pivoting gracefully on the asphalt. The roar of the engine deepened as he nudged the throttle, not in acceleration, but in a deliberate realignment. It was a movement of purpose, a complete reversal of their trajectory. One by one, like iron filings drawn by a powerful magnet, the other bikers followed suit. The metallic snick of kickstands being retracted, the harmonious rumble of dozens of engines filled the air. They peeled away from the roadside, not in a chaotic scramble, but with a practiced, synchronized precision born of countless miles ridden together. The formation, which had been heading away from Lily's burning home, now faced it squarely. Lily could only watch, a choked sob catching in her throat as the realization dawned. They were turning around. They were actually going to help. The sheer weight of relief that washed over her was almost as overwhelming as the fear that had consumed her moments before. A wave of dizziness threatened to buckle her knees, but she fought it, her gaze fixed on the powerful machines. Grizz, now facing the direction of the blaze, glanced back at her. His eyes, though still serious, held a new glint, something akin to grim determination. It wasn't pity. Not exactly. It was a recognition of shared humanity, a silent acknowledgement of the raw courage it took for a small girl to confront 40 intimidating strangers and beg for their help. He gave a sharp nod, a small, almost imperceptible gesture, but one that spoke volumes. It was an affirmation, a promise. Then, with a final powerful roar, he twisted the throttle. The lead bike surged forward, a dark arrow aimed directly at the heart of the crisis. Behind him, the remaining 39 machines followed, a thunderous cavalcade of chrome and leather. Their purpose irrevocably shifted. The road, which had been taking them away, now guided them toward the inferno, toward a desperate rescue, toward a destiny none of them could have anticipated just moments before. Lily, her breath coming in ragged gasps, stumbled to keep up, her small legs propelling her forward, fueled by a renewed, fragile hope. Roaring towards the flames. The roar that erupted from the street was not the fading murmur of departure, but a full-throated, guttural challenge to the night, or it swallowed the crackle of the fire and the frantic beating of Lily's own heart. 40 engines, once a symphony of receding power, now churned in unison, a single, potent organism of chrome and steel. The line of black leather and glinting metal, which had been dissolving into the distance, coalesced, a dark current surging back against the flow of the ordinary. Grizz was at the head, his silhouette against the orange glow of the growing blaze, a stark, unyielding statement. His massive bike, a custom beast of engineering, led the charge. The front wheel, a blur of motion, ate up the asphalt with ferocious hunger. Behind him, the other members of the Devil's Due MC followed, a disciplined wave, their formation tight, their intent clear. They moved not with the chaotic energy of a panicked crowd, but with the synchronized precision of a well-oiled machine, each rider a cog in a powerful, unified force. The air vibrated with their passage, a physical tremor that resonated through Lily's bones. Lily stood rooted for a moment, the wind of their return whipping strands of hair across her face. Her breath hitched, a desperate sob caught in her throat. Yet a strange, fragile hope blossomed amidst the terror. They were coming back. For her mom. The thought was a beacon in the encroaching darkness, a tiny spark of light against the encroaching inferno. She could feel the heat on her skin now, a tangible threat that underscored the urgency of every passing second. Her gaze, pulled by an awful magnetism, tore from the approaching bikers and fixed on her home. The small, unassuming house, usually a haven of warmth and safety, was now a gaping maw of destruction. Flames, once content to lick at the edges of the windows, now gorged themselves on the curtains, the wooden frames, the very fabric of the structure. They danced and writhed, orange and yellow tendrils, reaching skyward, like hungry serpents, devouring everything in their path. Smoke, thick and acrid, billowed from every opening, a dark, oppressive cloud that promised suffocation. The living room window, usually adorned with the lace curtains her mother loved, was a terrifying kaleidoscope of fire. She could almost see the furniture within, the familiar armchair, the small coffee table, all being consumed by the relentless inferno. A sickening thought pierced her. Was her mother still in there? Was she breathing that smoke? Was she conscious? Lily's stomach clenched, a cold dread washing over her. She had to be. She had to be okay. With a renewed surge of adrenaline, Lily pushed herself forward, her small legs pumping, her bare feet slapping against the cool pavement. She ran not to meet the bikers, but to keep pace with their terrifying speed, to stay visible, to be a constant, desperate reminder of the stakes. Her throat was raw from screaming, but she didn't care. Each breath was a struggle, ragged and shallow, but she pushed through the burning in her lungs, propelled by a primal fear and an even stronger love. The bikers were closer now, the individual features of their helmets and leathers becoming discernible. She could see the glint of chrome on their boots, the flash of their handlebars. The sheer mass of them, a rolling tide of muscle and metal, was both intimidating and, in this moment, profoundly reassuring. They weren't stopping at the curb. They were aiming directly for the house, their engines a thunderous promise of action. A shower of sparks erupted from the roof of her home, a horrifying testament to the fire's progress. A piece of the guttering, weakened by the heat, peeled away and crashed to the ground with a sickening thud. The flames seemed to surge in response, emboldened by their victory, growing larger, hotter, more ravenous. They seemed to laugh, a silent, flickering mirth that mocked Lily's helplessness. But then, the first bike roared past her, Grizz's face a mask of grim determination beneath his helmet. He didn't look at her, his eyes fixed on the inferno, assessing, planning. The wind from his passage ruffled her hair, a fleeting caress in the midst of chaos. Then came the next bike, and the next, a relentless stream of power and purpose. They were a force of nature, responding to a different kind of call, a desperate plea that had cut through the apathy of the night. Lily watched them, a tiny figure dwarfed by the enormity of the fire and the sudden, overwhelming presence of her unexpected saviors. The smell of burning wood and melting plastic intensified, a suffocating perfume of destruction. Time seemed to stretch and contract, each second an eternity, each flicker of flame a hammer blow to her already fragile hope. But they were here. They had come. And that, for now, was everything. The human chain. The roar of 40 engines died almost simultaneously, a thunderclap suddenly swallowed by the crackle and hiss of the inferno. Before the last echoes faded, boots were already hitting the gravel. Grizz, his face a grim mask beneath his bandana, was the first off his bike, his massive frame radiating an urgency that galvanized the others. No shouted orders were needed. The Devil's Due MC moved with a synchronized efficiency that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Lily watched, her breath catching in her throat as they dismounted. It wasn't the clumsy, slow unfolding of men relaxing after a long ride. These were warriors disengaging for battle. Each biker swung a leg over his machine with a practiced grace, setting the kickstands with a sharp, metallic clang. Their movements were swift, purposeful, a fluid choreography of leather and muscle. The air, already thick with smoke, now hummed with their focused energy. Their dark forms, usually so intimidating, now seemed like a phalanx of silent guardians. There was no hesitation, no questioning. Each man knew his role, and they executed it with an almost unsettling precision. Lily saw one biker, his face obscured by a full face helmet, pull a heavy-duty flashlight from his saddlebag. Another, a burly man with a braided beard, quickly unbuckled a thick canvas tarp. They weren't fumbling, they were preparing. Then Grizz turned, his gaze sweeping over the burning house. The front door, now a gaping maw, framed by licking flames, belched thick, oily smoke into the evening air. He didn't look at Lily, not yet. His focus was entirely on the rapidly escalating crisis. He raised a gloved hand, not in a gesture of command, but of direction. With a guttural grunt, he gestured towards the front of the house. The bikers responded instantly. They coalesced into a line, not a ragged formation, but a solid, unbroken chain of humanity. Strong hands grasped strong hands, leather-clad forearms flexing with the effort of holding firm. Lily saw a younger biker, his face barely visible beneath a shock of dark hair, link arms with an older, scar-faced man whose eyes held a weary wisdom. This was not a casual connection. It was a bond forged in mutual understanding and unspoken trust. The chain stretched from the relative safety of the front yard, where the heat was still bearable, directly towards the thickest plume of smoke billowing from the front door. Each man leaned slightly forward, a collective weight against the encroaching danger. Their faces, grim and set, reflected the flickering orange light of the fire, turning them into a living tableau of determination. Their expressions were not of bravado, but of a quiet, steel-edged resolve. Lily's small frame trembled, not from cold, but from a potent cocktail of fear and a burgeoning, unfamiliar hope. She had expected chaos, perhaps even a panicked retreat once they saw the full fury of the blaze up close. Instead, she witnessed an unexpected order, a disciplined response that defied their rough-and-tumble appearance. These men, who moments ago seemed like harbingers of trouble, were now her only chance. The heat intensified as the lead men approached the threshold. The air shimmered, distorting their forms, making them appear almost ethereal against the fiery backdrop. Smoke swirled around them, momentarily obscuring their faces, but the line held firm. Their stance was wide, their footing deliberate on the uneven ground. They were a living anchor, ready to pull against the destructive force that sought to consume everything she held dear. Grizz stood at the head of the chain, his back to Lily, his broad shoulders squared against the inferno. He was a pillar of unyielding strength, absorbing the heat and the smoke, preparing to plunge into the heart of it. Lily could almost feel the vibrations of their collective resolve, a silent promise echoing through the air. They were here, and they would not break. Her mother was inside, and this human chain, forged in desperation and unexpected camaraderie, was the only bridge that could reach her. Hope, fragile, yet undeniable, flickered within Lily. A small, stubborn flame against the encroaching darkness. Rescue from the inferno. The inferno roared, a living beast devouring Lily's home. Flames licked at the windows, their orange glow painting menacing shadows on the faces of the bikers. Grizz, his face set in grim determination, pointed to the front door, now a gaping maw of heat and smoke. "Dragon Knuckles, you're up. Get in. Get out." Dragon Knuckles, a man built like a granite statue with a sprawling crimson dragon tattoo snaking up his neck and disappearing under his bandana, simply nodded. He didn't speak, didn't hesitate. With a deep breath, he plunged into the swirling blackness, swallowed whole by the smoke and fire. Lily watched, her heart a frantic bird trapped in her chest. The heat emanating from the house was immense, blistering her skin even from 20 feet away. She could hear the crackle and hiss of burning timber, the angry roar of the fire. Every second stretched into an eternity. Where was Mama? Was she okay? Would Dragon Knuckles find her? Despair, cold and sharp, threatened to overwhelm her. But then she remembered Mama's gentle smile, her comforting touch, and a fierce resolve solidified within her. Mama was in there, and she wasn't giving up. The other bikers stood ready, a line of leather and muscle, their faces smudged with soot and sweat, eyes scanning the inferno for any sign of their comrade. They were silent, their collective tension a palpable hum in the charged air. No one moved, no one spoke, each man a link in a chain forged of shared purpose and unspoken loyalty. Then a flicker in the smoke-choked doorway, a shadow, then a form. Dragon Knuckles emerged, staggering slightly, the heat and exertion evident in his labored movements. But he wasn't empty-handed. Cradled carefully in his massive arms was a figure, limp and still. Mama. Mama! Lily's voice was a ragged cry, torn from her throat. Relief, so potent it made her knees weak, flooded through her. Mama was out. She was alive. Dragon Knuckles stumbled forward. His eyes, though red-rimmed and watering from the smoke, met Grizz's. "Got her!" he rasped, his voice raw. He moved with surprising gentleness, holding Sarah as if she were made of glass. Her face was smudged with soot, her hair disheveled, but she was breathing. A shallow rattling sound that was music to Lily's ears. The human chains snapped into action. The first biker reached out, taking Sarah's legs, his grip firm but careful. "Easy, easy," he murmured. Dragon Knuckles carefully transferred her upper body, his movements precise despite his evident exhaustion. Sarah was passed down the line, a precious, fragile cargo. Each pair of hands that touched her was strong, calloused, yet incredibly tender. Lily instinctively moved forward, trying to reach her mother. But Grizz's hand, surprisingly gentle, landed on her shoulder, holding her back. Wait, kid. Let them get her clear. His voice was low, gravelly, but it held a calming authority. He knew the danger wasn't over yet. Sarah, still unconscious, moved swiftly down the line of burly men. As she reached the last biker, who carefully lowered her onto a patch of grass well away from the searing heat, a deafening crack ripped through the air. The sound was like a giant tree splitting in half, a primal shriek of stressed timber. The roof of Lily's house, weakened by the relentless blaze, gave way. With a thunderous roar, a cascade of burning debris, wood, and ash collapsed inward. Flames surged skyward, a monstrous, triumphant inferno. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and a wave of superheated air washed over them, forcing them to shield their faces. Where moments before there had been a house, however damaged, there was now only a smoldering, rapidly disintegrating ruin. Lily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. If Dragon Knuckles had been even a few seconds slower, if the bikers had hesitated, Mama! The thought was too terrible to contemplate. A wave of gratitude, so overwhelming it brought tears to her eyes, washed over her. These intimidating, formidable men who had looked like harbingers of trouble just an hour ago had saved her mother. They were her heroes. Grizz watched the collapsing structure, a grim satisfaction settling on his face. He turned to Dragon Knuckles, who was now leaning against a tree, coughing hoarsely, but otherwise unharmed. Good work, Dragon. It was a rare compliment. And Dragon Knuckles simply nodded, his chest still heaving. The immediate danger was past, but the air still thrummed with the aftershocks of the fire and the lingering scent of smoke. Lily hurried to her mother's side, kneeling in the grass. Mama! Mama, can you hear me? Her voice was choked with emotion. Sarah stirred slightly, a soft groan escaping her lips. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing hazy, disoriented eyes. She looked at Lily, then at the smoking ruin of their home. A flicker of confusion, then recognition, crossing her face. Lily! Her voice was a fragile whisper, barely audible above the crackling embers. Lily reached out, carefully taking her mother's hand. It was warm, alive. I'm here, Mama. You're safe. She squeezed her mother's hand, a silent promise. And as she looked up at the faces of the bikers, now scarred with soot but gleaming with a quiet triumph, Lily knew that her world, though irrevocably changed, had been saved by the most unlikely of saviors. Amidst the ruins, Lily launched herself forward, a blur of motion propelled by a surge of pure, unadulterated relief. Her feet pounded the scorched earth, each frantic step eating up the short distance between her and the prone figure. Mama! She choked out, her voice raspy, barely a whisper against the crackling aftermath of the fire. The acrid scent of burnt wood and singed fabric clawed at her throat, but she ignored it, her gaze fixed solely on the pale face of her mother. When she reached Sarah, Lily dropped to her knees with a soft thud, a tremor running through her small frame. Her hands, still gritty with ash, hovered for a second, then gently cupped her mother's cheek. Sarah's skin was cool, clammy, and a faint smudge of soot marred her temple. Lily's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and hope. A soft groan escaped Sarah's lips, a sound so faint Lily almost missed it amidst the distant wail of sirens finally drawing closer. It was a ragged, painful sound, but it was life. Lily's breath hitched. Mama, she whispered again, tears blurring her vision. Sarah's eyelids fluttered, a slow, agonizing effort. Her brow furrowed as if battling a persistent fog. A shallow cough racked her body, a dry, hacking sound that sent a fresh wave of panic through Lily. But then, as if drawn by Lily's presence, her eyes slowly, painstakingly opened. They were unfocused at first, hazy and disoriented, darting around as if trying to comprehend the smoky ruined landscape. Then, slowly, painfully, they landed on Lily's face. A flicker of recognition sparked in their depths, a fragile light in the midst of the chaos. Lily, Sarah rasped, her voice thin and reedy, like dried leaves rustling in a forgotten wind. It was barely audible, but it was her mother's voice. Lily let out a sob, a raw, unrestrained sound of pure joy and profound relief. She leaned in, resting her forehead gently against her mother's. Oh, Mama, you're awake! You're okay! The words tumbled out, laced with tears and a profound gratitude that tightened her chest. Around them, a silent tableau had formed. The angels, a formidable crescent of leather and denim, stood like sentinels. Their faces, usually etched with a rugged indifference or a hint of menace, were softened, their gazes fixed on the small, intimate scene unfolding before them. Grizz, his imposing frame a solid anchor, watched with an intensity that spoke volumes. Dragon Knuckles, still streaked with soot and sweat, leaned against the fender of a nearby bike, his chest heaving slightly. But his eyes, though tired, held a flicker of deep satisfaction. They were a protective wall, an unexpected barrier against the encroaching world. The fire trucks, their sirens now piercingly loud, were pulling up the street, their flashing lights casting an ethereal, pulsating glow over the scene. Uniformed figures were beginning to spill out, their faces a mixture of confusion and urgency, as they surveyed the smoldering remains of what had once been a home. But the angels didn't move. They remained, a silent testament to their unexpected act of heroism. Their presence was a stark contrast to the destruction surrounding them. Twisted metal lay scattered amongst charred timbers, the air thick with the smell of damp ash and the lingering heat of the recent inferno. The house was a skeletal ruin, a gaping maw of blackened beams and collapsed walls, a stark reminder of the danger Sarah had just escaped. Yet, amidst this devastation, a small family was reuniting, shielded by a group of men who, just moments before, had been strangers, symbols of everything society deemed dangerous. Sarah, still weak, managed a faint, wobbly smile, her eyes never leaving Lily's. "My brave girl," she whispered, her voice gaining a fraction of strength. Her hand, trembling slightly, reached up and brushed a stray strand of hair from Lily's forehead. The touch was featherlight, but it was a connection, a reassurance that the nightmare was truly over. Lily clung to her mother, burying her face in the fabric of Sarah's singed clothes, inhaling the faint, familiar scent of her. She could feel the roughness of her mother's shirt against her cheek, the faint tremor of her mother's body. It was real. Sarah was alive. The angels watched, their silence profound. They didn't speak, didn't make a sound. Their presence was a quiet, unwavering promise. They had come, they had acted, and now they stood guard, ensuring the small family's fragile peace amidst the smoldering ruins. Their mission, for now, was complete. The world could rush in with its sirens and its uniforms, but for this brief, sacred moment, they were simply protectors, standing vigil over a mother and daughter, reunited against all odds. The air crackled, not just with the aftermath of the fire, but with an unspoken acknowledgement of a bond forged in flames, a testament to the unexpected kindness found in the most unlikely of places.